Hello, hunters. It is time for your 2020 exotic tier list. If you don't know the rules, here's a quick recap. The tier list is all about power in the highest level activities in the game. In PvE, that's master content, the dungeon, the raid, and any seasonal activities with a high power level requirement. The tier list isn't about stuff that can work, my favorite exotics, or anything like that. It is focused on how strong an exotic will make an average player. We'll begin with the 4 exotics that came out over the past year. Liar's Handshake from Season of the Drifter has allowed for some pretty bonkers stuff to happen, like killing Riven in seconds or other targets instantly. In base form, you'll punch something, and then you can follow up with another punch to deal 3 times the damage in that next punch. Stepping it up, you can add in a 1-2 punch shotgun to punch, shotgun, then punch again for more damage. Step it up once more, add in combination blow, which increases melee damage. Get a kill, punch, shotgun, punch. Step it up a final time by stacking combination blow multiple times, using your dodge to regenerate your melee attack to then regenerate your dodge. You can keep combination blow stacked as long as you're killing things with melee. This can get out of hand really quickly, allowing for some insane burst damage on targets. However, it does require a little bit of setup to start, even if it's not that difficult. In master content though, racking up 3 melee kills first can be sometimes a bit of a tall order. It depends on what enemies you're fighting against. Trying to melee certain targets can also mean death if you're not careful. However, the reward is sustained burst damage, which is usually something that doesn't go hand in hand. Again, this combo used to kill Riven in like 3 seconds before it was nerfed. Also, if you're melee attacked in PvP, you will cross counter the enemy for 300 damage. So it's pretty good there too, assuming you get in a lot of melee fights. KHEPRI'S Sting is technically a returning Destiny 1 exotic with some different functionality. Punching someone with full melee energy instantly uses your smoke bomb, and you gain true sight while in your own smoke bomb. So in PvE, the most you're really going to want to use this for is maybe to get close with a 1-2 punch shotgun, smack an enemy really hard, get the kill, and instantly go invis to get out safely. The true sight in PvE is, in my opinion, near useless, and it only lasts 3 seconds anyway. Now, it can have some value at the higher end of the PvP skill chain, allowing you to tag yourself with a smoke bomb for some quick wall hacks. However, I think that the average player is probably not going to be able to take advantage of this exotic and its effect as much as someone who is higher skilled will be able to, especially for 6v6 gameplay. In 3v3, you have a little bit more of an opportunity to make it work. Assassin's Cowl from Shadowkeep is where killing an enemy with a finisher in PvE or a melee attack in PvP gives you invisibility and restores some health and shields. I tend to struggle with getting melee-focused exotics to work a lot for me in PvP because I am just not that aggressive. Not to mention that WORMHUSK Crown, I think, is much more reliable as a health regen exotic, as the dodge cooldown on hunters is very short and will happen much more often than Assassin's Cowl's effect will probably happen in an average match of PvP. However, you can just swap to this exotic when you pop your super and then just take it off after. In PvE, this is a safety exotic, but in high-end content, you're usually going to coordinate finishers if people need special ammo or something like that. A finisher is probably not something you're going to want to use if you're in danger of dying due to being locked in an animation during that time. If you really want a health regeneration exotic, I would probably just use WORMHUSK. The Bombardiers, or Bombardier, depending on your use of the noun, introduced in Season of Dawn, leave a bomb where you last dodged, exploding after a couple of seconds. I don't see this as anything more than a novelty exotic to have some fun with every once in a while with maybe Top Tree Arcstrider or something. In PvP, sure, you can occasionally tag and kill some unsuspecting enemies, but in more intimate settings, higher skill players will become privy to your antics. In PvE, again, sure, have some fun, but that's pretty much the only thing they're really going to be good for. If you try to run this in Legend or Master content, make sure you have invisibility or you are going to get destroyed. Let's move on to the best ofs, where we'll take a look at the best subclass specific and subclass neutral exotics in PvE and PvP, starting with PvE. If you guys thought Titans and Warlocks barely got adjustments, let me introduce you to the Hunter PvE tier list. For Gunslingers, shockingly enough, Celestial Nighthawk for the third time in a row will continue to be your go-to for high-end PvE content. A delete button is a very nice thing to have for master content or just a very high damage shot that happens instantly. While the new bottom tree knock 'em down effect does not stack with Nighthawk, it's still the boss killing, champion killing power that you would want and need. The only downside is that you won't generate as many orbs as a 3-shot golden gun if you're getting 3 kills, but I think that is a sacrifice worth making. Other upper tier gunslinger exotics include Shards of GALANOR and OPHIDIA SPATHE, both of which are quite good in their own way. Shards of GALANOR got hit pretty hard by the nerf bat a while back, so while they're not as good as they used to be, I think they're still worthy of a selection in activities where you can get a lot of kills or hits, granting you about half energy back on a super that hits with the majority of your blades. Ophidia giving double knives is also just flat out strong, but I can understand any hesitations in using it. Middle Tree gives you playing with fire, which regens your knife, and the Burning Edge gives you dodge energy while enemies burn. Bottom Tree instantly refreshes your knife on a crit kill, and you can make it so dodging gives you melee energy too on any tree. So if you're playing well, you might not even really need that second charge. Still though, it's not a bad pick if you want to have a little bit of wiggle room with all those knives, and let's be honest, using Middle Tree and being able to just spam the button non-stop is a lot more fun than waiting around. For Arcstriders, again, for the third time, it's Raiden Flux. Raiden Flux does it all. Extends your super duration and gives you more damage with it. I really don't know what else you want in an exotic based around your super. The damage increase is really substantial, very good for clearing out both trash mobs and more threatening mobs alike. The duration increase is very noticeable as well, as long as you're killing stuff. I have nothing else to say. It is still amazing. Just make sure you take advantage of the light heavy attack combo, most of all if you're trying to kill high health targets. Other Arcstrider exotics include Liar's Handshake, Shinobu's Vow, and Lucky Raspberry, all of which are pretty good. Shinobu's Vow giving you an extra grenade, improved tracking, and bonus energy on hits is as good as it'll get for a grenade-focused exotic. But much like I'll talk about with young AHAMKARA'S Spine, I do need to dock it some percentage points because Skip Grenade is just not the greatest PvE grenade. Lucky Raspberry uses Arc Bolt Grenade, which is definitely a much more consistent grenade experience in PvE. Being able to chain arc bolts is really strong, but it is completely reliant RNG blessing you in order to do so. It's a bit of a risk-reward exotic if you're not constantly swarmed by enemies. And wouldn't you know it, the top PvE exotic for Night Stalkers continues to be Orpheus Rig, now buffed to work much better with Mobius Quiver. While the super energy effect on Orpheus was nerfed, it's still really good. It gives you quite a lot of energy anyway. I would say Orpheus Rig got hurt the least by the super energy nerfs, simply because of how the exotic generates that super energy. Mobius Quiver also got substantial buffs, and considering that this is the only exotic that buffs Quiver, you're not really left with many options there, not that this is a bad one. GWISIN Vest was nerfed pretty heavily, although that was more focused towards PvP. I'm giving this a lower rating because of Spectral Blade itself in PvE. It's just not as good as Arcstrider is. It'll clear out really weak enemies very easily, but I think Arcstaff, especially with Raiden, does exactly what Spectral does, except way better. While GWISIN's effect is very strong, it's only as good as the super is at any given moment. Now, this is normally the part in the video where we talk about subclass neutral exotics in PvE. However, Hunters have such great subclass specific exotics that the only neutral exotic I could really recommend is Stompies, which is a movement exotic which I typically do not give a rating to. I recommend it because I know hunters love Stompies basically everywhere, but it's totally personal preference. The highest ranked neutral exotics I have for PvE are the Dragon Shadow, Frosties, the 6th Coyote, and Gemini Jester, all at a 2.5. Not bad, but I think you're going to get so much more out of a subclass specific exotic. That also kind of gives you an idea of what I think of literally all neutral exotics in PvE for Hunter. Frosties giving you energy while you sprint is solid. You're probably sprinting a lot in Destiny, if I were a betting man. The regeneration is noticeable, but it's definitely not broken. If you're playing on a subclass branch that regens energy for you on certain conditions, then these won't be as much of a difference maker. But they're a good exotic for people who just don't want to think at all during gameplay and just passively have a bonus coming in. The Dragon's Shadow's buff lasts long enough that if you invest into 50 mobility, you can have its effect up almost permanently as long as you're dodging on every cooldown. Problem is that in PvE, the buffs that Dragon Shadow gives are just not hugely vital to your experience in killing stuff. Also, timer for Wraith Metal when? Bungie? The 6th Coyote is interesting because dodges are so strong for hunters. Being able to get 2 seems really solid. However, usually with an exotic, I feel like you want the exotic effect to happen on a dodge, not just getting another dodge. There are some subclass perks that can get you some nice benefits from having multiple dodges, like top or bottom tree Nightstalker, for example. But if you choose to invest in mobility, you can get stupidly low cooldowns on your dodges. So if you really want to invest in dodging, combined with a subclass branch that utilizes heavy dodging, then you're going to get some really solid use out of this. Gemini Jester is also pretty good in the mid tier for shutting down enemies in PvE. Similar to a flashbang grenade, enemies get completely disoriented, allowing you time to escape or maybe set up some kills. However, the effect does not last nearly as long. It's pretty nice to have for higher level stuff, especially if you can hop into the fray while invisible. Finally, we'll move to everything else not mentioned. Lucky Pants restoring ammo is fine, although again, dodging is not too much work on a hunter. The opening shot effect on Lucky Pants is nice for PvP, but for PvE, not really that important. Young AHAMKARA'S Spine's effect is pretty good, but I just have to rate it low because Trip Mine Grenade itself is just not that good in PvE. If you're in an activity where you can make it good, then it's pretty decent, but otherwise I consider it more of a PvP exotic. FOETRACER gets you some bonus damage on low HP targets, but it's not a big difference maker, and the wall hacks for PvE are not that important. Sealed AHAMKARA Grasps had some potential when Smoke Bomb auto-reloaded your guns on every damage tick, but that's gone now, so you can just trigger a reload with a dodge. Graviton Forfeit extends invisibility durations and speeds up melee recharge speed while invisible. I think the amount of times you need to stay invisible just a tiny bit longer in PvE are not frequent enough to justify the use of this, even with the bonus melee energy. What you can do is potentially keep up Heart of the Pack ×3 for a very long time by stacking it up and then refreshing the buff by popping a Vanish in Smoke on yourself every 15 to 20 seconds. This assumes that you have very high mobility for fast dodge cooldowns. But you don't really need Graviton to make this happen anyway, it just makes it a little bit easier to do it. Knucklehead Radar is a relic of Destiny 1, and in PvE, it has close to zero usefulness. The radar, while somewhat important to the experience, is not important enough to have a full exotic dedicated to it, while also providing no other benefits. Let's move on to PvP. In PvP, the tables turn, where neutral exotics tend to come out on top over the subclass-specific exotics due to so many of the neutrals being based around dodging or other movement effects. I'm going to go over the subclass specific exotics quickly because I don't really think many of them are worth using over the neutrals. For gunslingers, it'll probably be Ophidia for the double knives thanks to the new one-shot throwing knife, although young AHAMKARA'S gets a little bit more credit here. Shards isn't really what it used to be post-nerf. For Arcstriders, I think SHINOBU'S is the safest, most reliable bet here. You can always swap to Raiden for your super if you want, which I would advise if you do remember. Lucky Raspberry has the ability to completely pop off or do literally nothing at all. SHINOBU'S does not have that risk factor. For Night Stalkers, GWISIN Vest isn't what it used to be, but it's your only option for Spectral Blade, and it's not bad. Orpheus is the strat if you're running Quiver. Both of these can be swapped to before popping your super anyway. Graviton Forfeit gets much more appeal here since being invisible a lot of the time in PvP is much more valuable than it is in PvE. Being able to wander the map with minimal radar detection is pretty good, on top of stacking 100 mobility for dodge cooldowns. Hunters are loaded with top tier neutral exotics for PvP. However, two will stand out at the top, both with a 5 out of 5 ranking. The first of those is Dragon's Shadow. Like I mentioned earlier, while the Dragon's Shadow's effect can be continuously procced at high levels of mobility, in PvE, weapon reload and ready speeds aren't as impactful in moment-to-moment gameplay. But in PvP, they're very impactful. And with Dragon's Shadow also reloading all of your guns on a dodge, you can get both your melee cooldown and reloaded weapons in one dodge. And again, you can have this active a very large portion of the time if you invest in 50 mobility. Very potent exotic, as long as you're on top of your cooldown usage. The next is Stompies. Now, I don't like to rate movement exotics, but I would be stupid to not say that these are a top tier exotic for hunters in PvP. This exotic has literally defined the way some people even play the hunter class. It is a purely mobility-based exotic, slide distance increased, sprint speed, adjustments to all jumps. I know plenty of people who use these in PvE just because the adjusted jumps and movement feel so good. Moving down the list, we have FOETRACER, WORMHUSK Crown, and GEMINI JESTER. FOETRACER is on here solely for the wall hack effects. To actually proc the wall hack effect, you need to make sure the enemy's name and health bar pop up for a short time, otherwise you're not going to mark them. Wall hacks have proven themselves to be quite strong in Destiny 2, almost to the point that regenerating ammo was in Destiny 1. The bonus damage against low health targets can help seal some deals, but it's not the main appeal of the exotic to me in PvP. WORMHUSK Crown, minus the crazy battery mod of Season 8, got knocked down a huge peg, but is still a very simple to use, effective exotic. You can use it to get out of trouble, you can use it to instantly re-engage targets, and it's bound to dodge, which can have a very brief cooldown. Very strong effect, although not compared to the old days. GEMINI JESTER disorients players and removes the radar for a short time. Removing the radar is slightly underrated in my opinion, but it does require you to be aggressive to take advantage of, but not so aggressive that you need to be melee killing everything in sight like some other exotics. You need to be pretty methodical as well, and even then, removing someone else's radar is not an instant win button, so that's why it's towards the upper tier, but not really super high. Frosties, again, you're doing a ton of sprinting in PvP. This is passive energy gains in the background while you're playing. Obviously helps to be a little aggressive, but you don't need to micromanage anything, which I think helps boost this up a little bit. It's a little different compared to Eye of Another World because you can control how often you're getting energy and you get a little bit more of it. Lucky Pants and Oathkeeper are up here under very specific conditions. Oathkeeper is going to be for the bow users to allow you to just hold a lane as long as you want without having to knock another arrow, which is nice. Lucky Pants have synergy with bows in that you can tag someone with a bow headshot or a body shot and then instantly swap to a hand cannon like Ariana's Vow to try to headshot kill them or body shot kill them via the bonus ready speed and accuracy after swapping to a hand cannon. However, This is definitely a bit more of an advanced loadout to use overall, and I don't know how much the average player is really going to engage with this style. And if you're not using a bow, I think Lucky Pants go down a little bit. And now for the rest of them. MECHANEER'S TRICKSLEEVES. Sidearms did get a buff recently. Their target acquisition across the board was buffed, and sidearms are not a complete meme anymore. Therefore, I think the old TRICKSLEEVES have gotten some value now for sidearm users. They haven't broken into the top tier, but for some regular 6v6, not bad if you wanted to try them. The 6th Coyote has the same issues mentioned earlier. Usually you want your exotic to do something when you dodge, not just give you another one. I think this one rings a little more true in PvP since you don't have the same freedom in PvP as you do PvE. Knucklehead radar gets a little more value here thanks to the radar actually mattering in PvP, but again, I think it needs to do something a little bit more to really validate itself. Sealed AHAMKARA'S, reloading your gun on a melee attack. It's fine, maybe can save you in some really specific situations, but again, I'm low on melee attack-based exotics in general, and I'd probably use something that could regenerate my health. That is your Hunter exotic tier list, your final tier list for 2020. The next major tier list revision will be in 2021, and I definitely plan on doing it a little bit differently next time around. I will, of course, drop updates on the channel for any significant buffs or nerfs that happen to exotics over the next year. If you enjoyed this video or the series, a positive rating is appreciated. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.